Oma, a radiant 28-year-old woman, was in the final stretch of planning her dream wedding with her fiancé Charles. Their relationship had been the epitome of love and mutual respect, a journey of shared dreams and unwavering support. Charles, a charismatic and kind-hearted man, had swept Oma off her feet 2 years earlier with his wit, charm, and unshakable faith. From spontaneous beach outings to late-night heart-to-heart conversations, their love story was one that made those around them believe in true love. Charles had always been attentive, the kind of partner who remembered the little things, like the exact way Oma took her coffee or how she loved sunflowers more than roses. He often wrote her love notes, slipping them into her purse or leaving them on her pillow. For Oma, he was more than a fiancé, he was her confidant, her best friend, and the man she couldn't wait to build a life with. With only 2 weeks left before their wedding, Oma was both excited and overwhelmed. Her days were filled with venue confirmations, dress fittings, and endless calls to vendors. One of her last tasks was to collect the wig she had ordered online for her big day. She had chosen a piece from the renowned Hair by Ella, a vendor famous for luxurious wigs. It was her first time purchasing from them, and though she was thrilled about the quality, she wanted to ensure everything was perfect. After all, she wanted to look her absolute best for Charles, who always told her she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Oma planned to pick up the wig from the store that evening, but the day's errands had delayed her. By the time she arrived, the store had already closed. Frustrated but determined, she called the owner, Madame Ella, hoping for a solution. Madame Ella, the gracious and well-known entrepreneur, sympathized with Oma's plight. She suggested Oma pick it up from her home the following day. But with her tight schedule, Oma insisted on collecting it that same evening. Seeing her determination, Madame Ella relented and shared her address, inviting Oma to her home. As Oma made her way to Ella's house, she thought about Charles. She couldn't wait to see the look on his face when he saw her on their wedding day, her hair perfectly styled and her dress shimmering under the lights. Little did she know, the visit to Madame Ella's house would unravel secrets that would turn her world upside down. Madame Ella's home was a picture of elegance. Nestled in a serene estate, the house was massive, with a beautifully landscaped garden, high gates, and a driveway that gleamed under the soft evening lights. The inside was even more stunning, adorned with modern furniture, tasteful art, and an air of sophistication that left Oma in awe. Ella welcomed her warmly and invited her to sit in the living room while she fetched the wig. Oma, ever curious, took a moment to admire the room. Her eyes fell on a large framed wedding photo on the wall. The groom in the picture looked strikingly familiar. At first, Oma dismissed it as a coincidence. But as she moved closer, her heart raced. The man in the photo wasn't just familiar, he was unmistakably her fiancé, Charles. Confused and shaken, Oma sat back, unsure of what to do. When Ella returned, she casually asked about the man in the photo. Ella, glowing with pride, said, "That's my husband, Charles. He's a deacon at our church." Oma's world crumbled. Her Charles? A deacon? Married? She needed proof before jumping to conclusions. Taking a deep breath, she decided to play it cool and hatch a plan. Oma couldn't contain her emotions for long. She confronted Ella, explaining that her fiancé looked exactly like Ella's husband. At first, Ella laughed it off, confident in her husband's loyalty. But when Oma pulled out her phone and showed her photos of Charles, Ella's laughter stopped. The beach photo of Charles and Oma holding hands was undeniable. Still, Ella accused Oma of trying to destroy her home. Do you know how many women come up with stories like this just to break families apart? Ella snapped. Oma felt insulted but kept her composure. Oma proposed a plan to clear any doubts. She suggested calling Charles to her house under the pretense of needing company. Reluctantly, Ella agreed. When Oma called Charles, his response was telling. He agreed to come over immediately, claiming to be in a meeting. Meanwhile, Ella called him and asked for groceries, but Charles lied about being unavailable. At that moment, both women realized the bitter truth: they were sharing the same man. Both women were stunned by Charles's deceit. After confirming he was lying, they sat in silence, processing the betrayal. Despite their initial animosity, they realized that Charles was the real enemy. "I can't believe he would do this," Ella said, her voice trembling. "He's a deacon, for heaven's sake." Oma nodded, still clutching her phone. "He's been playing both of us. But he can't get away with this. We need to teach him a lesson." Ella hesitated, her pride bruised. "I don't know, what do you have in mind?" Oma leaned forward. "We team up. We expose him and make him pay for what he's done." Ella, after a long pause, finally agreed. "All right. Let's make him regret this." The women devised a plan. Oma would act as though nothing was wrong and proceed with the wedding preparations. Meanwhile, Ella would confront Charles subtly, pretending to suspect nothing while gathering more evidence. The goal was to catch him red-handed with both women present. To make the trap effective, Oma decided to invite Charles to a pre-wedding dinner at her house, where Ella would also be present, disguised as a guest. Ella, despite her pain, played along, determined to see Charles's reaction. "Do you think he'll fall for it?" Ella asked. "Oh, he will," Oma replied. "Men like him always do." A few days later, Oma called Charles. "Darling, I'm hosting a small pre-wedding dinner at my place," she said sweetly. "It's just a few close friends and family. You'll come, won't you?" Charles hesitated. "I have a lot of work, but I'll try my best to make it." "Please, it means so much to me," Oma insisted. After some persuasion, Charles agreed. Meanwhile, Ella prepared herself for the evening, choosing an outfit that would make her unrecognizable at first glance. On the evening of the dinner, Oma's house was beautifully decorated, a picture-perfect setting for the occasion. Guests arrived one by one, but Ella stayed hidden in a room, waiting for Charles. Oma felt a mix of nerves and anger but kept her composure. When Charles finally arrived, he was his usual charming self, greeting Oma with a kiss. "You look stunning, my love," he said. Oma forced a smile. "I'm so glad you're here. There's someone I want you to meet." Oma led Charles to the living room, where Ella sat with her back turned. "This is Madame Ella," Oma said, her tone icy. Charles froze. Ella turned around slowly, meeting his wide-eyed stare. "Hello, Charles," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. The color drained from Charles's face as he stammered, "Ella. What are you doing here?" Before he could concoct a lie, Oma pulled out her phone, showing pictures and texts. Ella followed suit, revealing years of receipts from their marriage. "You have some explaining to do," Oma said, crossing her arms. Charles looked from Ella to Oma, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "I can explain," he began, his voice shaky. Oma raised an eyebrow. "Explain. I'd love to hear it." Ella crossed her arms, her tone cold. "Go on, Charles. Tell us how you managed to have a wife and a fiancé at the same time." Charles stammered, fumbling for words. "Ella, you know I've been under a lot of stress lately. And Oma, I didn't mean for this to happen." "Didn't mean for this to happen?" Oma interrupted. "You proposed to me, Charles. You planned a wedding with me while you were married to her." The room fell silent, the weight of his betrayal heavy in the air. Ella stepped forward, her voice firm. "Charles, you've lied to me, to her, and to God. You're a deacon, for crying out loud. You have no excuse." Charles tried to defend himself. "Ella, I love you. This thing with Oma was a mistake. A mistake that lasted over a year." Oma shot back. "Do you even hear yourself?" Ella nodded. You're a disgrace, Charles. But we are not going to let you off the hook. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell the truth to everyone, the church, your family, and Oma's family, or we will. Charles's eyes widened in panic. You can't do that. My reputation. Your reputation. Ella sneered. You should have thought about that before living a double life. Oma and Ella gave Charles a week to come clean. In the meantime, they began gathering more evidence, texts, pictures, and videos. Ella contacted a few church members discreetly to hint at Charles's misconduct, preparing the ground for the fallout. Oma, on the other hand, met with her family to explain the situation. Though heartbroken, her family supported her decision to call off the wedding and join Ella in exposing Charles. Do you think he'll actually confess? Oma asked Ella one evening. Ella shook her head. Men like him never do. That's why we need a backup plan. The women decided to confront Charles at church during a Sunday service if he didn't confess by the deadline. Ella, being well respected in the community, knew it would create a scandal, but she didn't care anymore. If he won't speak the truth, we will, Ella said firmly. Oma agreed. He doesn't deserve to walk away unscathed after what he's done. As the deadline approached, Charles grew more desperate, trying to plead with both women to drop their plan. But they remained steadfast, determined to hold him accountable. The day of reckoning arrived. Charles had failed to confess as expected. With nerves of steel, Ella and Oma prepared themselves for the confrontation at church. That Sunday, they walked into the service together, turning heads as they entered. Charles, seated at the front, froze when he saw them. The sermon began, but neither woman was listening. They were waiting for the right moment to strike. When the pastor invited the congregation to share testimonies, Ella stood up, her voice ringing clear. Pastor, I have something important to say, she began, the entire church falling silent. The congregation turned their attention to Ella, curious and intrigued. Charles shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face pale. Ella took a deep breath, her voice steady but laced with anger. Many of you know me as Madam Ella, she began. A wife, a businesswoman, and someone who has always valued family and faith. But today, I stand before you as a woman betrayed by the one person who vowed to honor and love me, my husband, Charles. Gasps echoed through the room. Charles stood abruptly, his voice quivering. Ella, this isn't the place. Oh, but it is, Charles, Ella interrupted, her voice cutting through his. You've built your reputation in this church pretending to be a man of God. The people here deserve to know the truth. Ella motioned to Oma, who stood and addressed the congregation. My name is Oma, and 2 weeks ago, I was planning my wedding to this same man, Charles. Imagine my shock when I found out he was already married to Madam Ella. She held up her phone showing pictures of herself and Charles together. He proposed to meet, planned a wedding with me, and lied to my family, all while being married. The congregation erupted in murmurs. Some looked at Charles in disbelief, while others whispered to one another. The pastor stood, trying to restore order. Ella, Oma, the pastor said, his voice firm. Let us handle this matter privately. No, Ella said, her voice unwavering. This is no longer a private matter. Charles has been living a double life, and the church needs to hold him accountable. Charles raised his hands, attempting to defend himself. Please, everyone, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like. Ella laughed bitterly. Isn't it? Then explain the pictures, the wedding, the lies, and the betrayal. Go ahead, Charles. We are all listening. He stammered, searching for words, but the weight of the evidence was undeniable. The congregation stared at him with their trust shattered. The pastor sighed deeply. Charles, as a deacon, you are held to a higher standard. This behavior is unacceptable. We will have to investigate further, but for now, you are relieved of your duties. After the service, the church buzzed with conversations about the scandal. Charles left in disgrace, his head hanging low. Ella and Omar stood together, a strange camaraderie forming between them. I couldn't have done this without you, Ella said, her voice soft. Neither could I, Omar replied. He deserved every bit of this. They hugged, both knowing their lives would never be the same, but also feeling a sense of closure. With Charles out of their lives, both women focused on rebuilding. Ella poured her energy into expanding her business, while Omar took time to heal and reflect. Though the journey had been painful, they emerged stronger, united by their shared experience. Charles's disgrace spread like wildfire. News of his double life reached his workplace, friends, and extended family. The once respected deacon was now the subject of public ridicule and whispers. People who had admired him began to avoid him, and his social standing crumbled. Ella and Omar ensured the truth stayed alive by sharing their story with close friends and family, emphasizing the importance of exposing deception. Some of Charles's colleagues, appalled by his actions, reported his behavior to the company's ethics board, putting his job in jeopardy. People deserve to know who they are dealing with, Ella told Omar. If we stay silent, he'll just find another woman to deceive. Charles's lies also had financial consequences. Ella, being the savvy businesswoman she was, began reviewing their joint finances. To her shock, she discovered that Charles had been funneling money from their accounts to support his relationship with Omar, gifts, trips, and even part of the wedding expenses. Ella confronted him one last time. You've not only broken my heart but also stolen from me, she said, throwing a stack of bank statements at him. You'll pay back every single penny, or I'll take this to court. Charles, defeated and unable to argue, promised to repay her. Ella, however, didn't rely on his words alone. She filed for legal action to ensure her money was returned. Ella and Omar, tired of Charles's manipulative tactics, decided to make their story public. They shared their experiences on social media, warning other women to be cautious of men like Charles. The post went viral, with hundreds of people expressing their outrage and support. Charles became a trending topic for all the wrong reasons. His face and story were plastered across the internet, and many women came forward with their own stories of deceit, inspired by Ella and Omar's courage. The world knows exactly who he is, Omar said with satisfaction. Charles's family, especially his elderly parents, were devastated by the revelations. His mother, a devout woman, was heartbroken to learn of his betrayal and deceit. She confronted him, her voice filled with disappointment. How could you shame this family, Charles? We raised you better than this. Unable to bear the weight of his family's disappointment, Charles found himself ostracized, even by those closest to him. As if his personal life wasn't in enough shambles, Charles's professional life took a hit. His company decided to terminate his employment, citing a violation of their code of ethics due to the scandal. He brought this on himself, Ella said when she heard the news. Every action has consequences. Charles's once promising career was now in ruins, and he struggled to find a new job as his tarnished reputation followed him everywhere. The story of Omar, Ella, and Charles teaches powerful moral lessons about honesty, accountability, and resilience. It underscores the importance of truth and integrity in relationships, as lies and deceit inevitably lead to pain and destruction. It also highlights the strength and unity that women can find in supporting one another through betrayal, turning shared adversity into empowerment. Additionally, it serves as a reminder that actions have consequences, and those who deceive others will eventually face justice. Lastly, it emphasizes the importance of self-worth, encouraging individuals to stand up for themselves and refuse to tolerate dishonesty in any form.